Let's get into it. Quick hits, gentlemen. We start with New England. Fans have a little cause for concern this week as star tight end Rob Gronkowski missed his third straight practice today. What impact will Gronk's injury have on the Pats, Max?
Huge. If I was a Pats fan, I'd be going crazy right now. When Gronk is Gronk, they're the odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl. When he's compromised, suddenly they're beatable. Even like in the Super Bowl with the jump ball that Tom Brady threw and he couldn't get it against the Giants. Without Gronk, they're just a nice playoff team. With him, they're the odds-on favorite. I'd be petrified anytime I heard injury reports on Gronkowski.
That's fair in the grand scheme of things, but not this week because they're going up against Chip Kelly's 49ers. End of discussion.
We got the music back, Stephen A. Earlier this week, Odell Beckham Jr. said the Giants, yes, work it, have the Super Bowl defense. But yesterday, his teammate Jason Pierre-Paul wants him to dial back the championship talk as they don't need a new hype. Does JPP have a point?
Yes, he does. Because they're the Giants and they've missed the playoffs 6 of the last 7 years. I mean, they got to get it together. And just because you're having a good run right now, let's put things in perspective. You need to continue to produce. Let's make the playoffs first. Crawl before you walk, Odell Beckham Jr. Crawl before you walk.
Super Bowl, Odell, one game at a time. That'll take care of itself. JPP's absolutely right.
It's all about the Friday jams right now. Big matchup in the AFC South on Sunday between the Titans and the Colts. Which quarterback would you rather have, Max Kellerman, Mariota, or Luck?
Mariota's a fantastic quarterback. I'd rather have Andrew Luck than anyone. The answer is Luck.
I would go with Marcus Mariota for this particular game because I don't like the way the Colts have been taking care of Andrew Luck. We're not just thinking about Andrew Luck's talent. We're thinking about his situation. Mariota appears to be in a better situation, at least for the moment.
Stephen A., the #1 overall pick in this year's draft, Jared Goff, will make his NFL debut this week against the Dolphins. What do you expect?
Nothing. He plays for Jeff Fisher, going up against the Miami Dolphins, who've won 4 in a row. Anything is going to succeed Case Keenum, who isn't that great, and we all know it. They're the worst offense in football, but that's not Jared Goff's fault. I think he's a sacrificial lamb this week. I hope otherwise, but I suspect he is.
I mean, listen, they have no offense. So Goff doesn't have to be great, and I'm not expecting anything from him either, or else he would have started already. But if he's this much better than Case Keenum with some of these low-scoring games these guys have been involved in, he'll look really good because they'd have a chance to win some of these games. Not expecting it, but he doesn't have to do much to look good next to Keenum.
The rumors have been swirling of late that there is trouble in Green Bay, and if you don't believe the hype, like Aaron Rodgers cautions you not to, let's just look at their record, folks. The Packers are 4-5, third in the NFC North, coming off 3 straight losses to the Falcons, the Colts, and the Titans. Sunday, they have a tough test in our nation's capital. Stephen A., which Rodgers shows up?
You know what? I think the bad man that he is. I believe in Aaron Rodgers. I believe he's a superstar. I believe he's going to show up. And I think that if he doesn't, it's going to be the ultimate indictment against him because I think it's time for us to sit up here and recognize what has transpired. You know, we talk about a guy in Coach Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy, I think, has guided the Green Bay Packers, to the playoffs like 7 straight years. This man, he's guided them to the playoffs in 7 straight years. They've won a Super Bowl title. You can't question the man's credentials in terms of what they've done in Green Bay. They've won more games with him than they did with Vince Lombardi, for crying out loud. But at the same time, there does come a point in time, Max, where your voice becomes tired. People don't want to hear it. It's one of those situations where you start getting to that point where people are wondering whether a new voice is needed. And it especially elevates exponentially when you consider the fact that you have the greatness of a quarterback in Aaron Rodgers and you don't feel like it's being maximized. There are very rare situations, Max, where the standard that exists in Green Bay exists, period. Pittsburgh, Green Bay, once upon a time, Dallas and San Francisco. You get the playoff victories, that's fine. But it's about Super Bowls. Brett Favre delivered the Super Bowl, but 2 Super Bowl appearances. Aaron Rodgers delivered the Super Bowl, but hasn't been back to the Super Bowl since. There was a divisional playoff loss after they won that Super Bowl as a 6th seed in 2010. There was a collapse against Seattle that ultimately followed. There's been 6 full seasons where there's been no Aaron Rodgers in Super Bowl mentioned in the same breath. And at some point in time, you're not going to question the talent when the talent still exists in the greatness of an Aaron Rodgers. You're going to question the coach. So I think saying all of that, Sunday's game in D.C. is pivotal. Because if Aaron Rodgers doesn't show up and play big time, particularly off of a collapse, the likes of which we saw last week with Green Bay against Tennessee, especially if that defense stinks up the joint again, I think that seat, that hot seat that Mike McCarthy may be on from that fan base in Green Bay is going to intensify greatly. And I think Aaron Rodgers knows it. I think he steps up. He responds to the challenge. I think the rest of the team does so as well. And they beat Washington at FedEx Field. Because if they don't, Mike McCarthy, life's going to get very, very uncomfortable for this man.
The question is, which Aaron Rodgers shows up against Washington this Sunday? And I agree, it's going to be the very good version of Aaron Rodgers. But the very good version of Aaron Rodgers this year is not quite the very great version of several years ago. You know, there was a time, not that long ago, not this season or last, but not that long ago, where I felt Aaron Rodgers was making his case as the greatest quarterback who ever lived. Not saying he would have won the case, but he was forcing himself into that conversation. And part of that is because based on his age and his team and his coach, you know, we assume some things about the trajectory of his career, that it was gonna have a long prime, right? Because he got great, even though he sat behind Brett Favre for a while, he got great right away. And wow, look at this guy, the multifaceted game he has. That's going to age well. But that hasn't been the case over the last couple years. And I suspect what's going on with Rodgers, it's not just the pieces around him. I suspect what's going on is something we see sometimes with pitchers in Major League Baseball. They have a prime, then they dip down for a couple years, and you think maybe it's over for them. And then the really great ones, the Hall of Famers, seem to have a second prime. And what goes on during those years where they dip is sometimes injury, but oftentimes there's a little something off their fastball now. It's imperceptible even to them, but they're not quite as dominant as they once were, and yet they're approaching everything the same way. And until they learn to adjust to their new physical reality, they take that little dip, and once they learn to adjust, they can kind of mimic the success they had in their prime as a slightly different kind of player. I suspect that's what's happening with Rodgers right now. That said, for all the sky is falling Chicken Little talk about him, he has 22 touchdowns against 7 interceptions this year. Whatever you want to say about their record, Molly, they're a game out of first. You know, they have one game worse than the division leader. So, and it's not an exceptionally strong division. Aaron Rodgers has the 6th best QBR in the NFL. I mean, for any other quarterback, you're like having a fantastic season. Still, only 5 quarterbacks having a better season, and every single one of them is in the MVP conversation. So,
let me tell you something.
What Rodgers is going to show up against Washington?
Hello, let me answer all those numbers you threw out there. Let me answer that. Yeah, let me answer that because I'm damn near lost with what you're saying.
When you talk for 5 minutes, do I jump in? Go ahead.
I don't throw numbers at everybody. They ain't math class. I mean, we ain't at Columbia or Princeton.
Debate show, I mean,
a brother needs some help. I'm saying a brother needs some help. I don't quite comprehend what you're saying.
Go ahead, my brother. Take all the help you want.
Let me tell you. All I'm saying is this. With all that you just said, do you realize, Max Kellerman, that Aaron Rodgers only has 2 300-yard games this year? 2.
Yeah.
See how simple that math is? Far less complicated than what you would say. 2 300-yard
touchdowns and interceptions.
Aaron Rodgers, 2.
Right. But you know what's happening, Stephen A?
300-yard games.
Do you know what's happening?
What?
When he is under pressure, which he's under much more often than not, like every other quarterback. You know, when he gets sacked a lot, he's not really good. Yeah, that's what happens to everyone when they get sacked a lot. So the question in this game, what Aaron Rodgers is going to show up, which one? How much do you have faith? How much faith do you have in the Washington team being able to get pressure on Rodgers? They don't have a special ability in that department. Even going into the season, they really needed to beef up the defensive line, and instead they spent the money in the secondary on Josh Norman. So they've actually exceeded expectations in that department a little bit in terms of their ability to pressure the quarterback because they're about average. So can an average team in that department create enough pressure on Rodgers that it brings him from still an elite quarterback, if not the best at this moment, to a bad quarterback? No, I don't think so. I don't think Washington is the team to do that, and I expect the bad man, as you say, to show up.
Well, he's a bad boy, and I think that, like you said, that second level where you can resurrect yourself, because I don't see I don't see diminished ability in Aaron Rodgers. I don't see less arm strength. I don't see less of a motor. What I see is less accuracy. I see a guy that doesn't have his ultimate weapon in Jordy Nelson being the Jordy Nelson we once knew from 2 years ago. I think as a result, Jordy Nelson, he's trying to help Jordy Nelson, compensate for whatever deficiencies he may have still coming off of that injury, because I think Jordy Nelson will be even better next year than he is right now, because I think he's still recovering from that injury he suffered last year. Randall Cobb, Devontae Adams, others got to step up. Eddie Lacy been up and down health-wise. I think those things have factored into the equation. But I've also seen Aaron Rodgers miss throws he would normally make. But again, the arm strength is still there. The ability is still there. The motor is still there. I just see a guy, to me, that for some reason the timing has lost. And I think that's something he could get back. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if it came back this weekend, even against Breland, Norman, and those boys.
And even everything that you just said, and we know he's fallen off the last couple of years, all that's true. He is still capable, Aaron Rodgers, of playing on a higher level than everyone else. Think about the comeback against Arizona. Ultimately, they lost in overtime. Aaron Rodgers needed to throw a touchdown to win. Scrambled out. Avoided pressure with his legs, kept his eyes down the field. Amazing, as usual. There's escapability, as they say. And threw, a 60-yard Hail Mary down the field. But you can't really call it a Hail Mary because he threw it where only the offensive player had a chance at the ball. And then they called it back. And then he did it again on the next play, bringing that team to overtime. No one can do it like that except for Aaron Rodgers. And we saw it as recently as the last playoff game he played at the end of last season. It's still in there somewhere. So I expect him to ball against Washington.
All right, well, forget the struggles on the field. We had Randall Cobb with the indirect message to Rodgers saying we need to stop pointing fingers at each other, keeping things in-house, keep it tighter, and stick together. We'll see if they can get it done. Sunday Night Football, Washington favored by 3. But coming up next, incredibly tough contest this weekend for the #2 overall pick in the draft, Carson Wentz, as he goes up against the Seahawks. Remember, Pennsylvania, he started off the season on fire, leading the team to a 3-0 start. But since they faltered, going 2-4. Let's take a look now at just how up and down his season has been. His average total QBR through the first 3 games was a solid 63, then a significant drop-off in weeks 4 through 7, followed by a decent recovery in the last 3 games. Stephen A., you know this city very well. How important is this Seahawks matchup for Mr. Wentz?
Believe it or not, it's not that important. A matter of fact, a legitimate argument should be made that this is a game he shouldn't even play. They should consider it to starting Chase Daniels, for crying out loud. Why can you sit up there and put him through that kind of stuff going on right now? How could you do that to him? Because here's the reality. When you think about Carson Wentz, here's what's going on. You've got Jordan Matthews, whose back is messed up. You got Zach Ertz with the bulky hamstring. You've got Aguilar, who hasn't had a 50-plus yard receiving game since the opening against the hapless Cleveland Browns. You've got Dorial Green, Beckham, who wasn't even targeted last year. You have no wideouts to speak of, and you have a running game which is suspect at times going up against Seattle. This is a doomsday scenario for the Philadelphia Eagles, who are on the road. This is not at home at Lincoln Financial Field. This is a bad, bad day. This is one of them games that I would actually think about taking Carson Wentz out early, because he may very well end up getting himself hurt in this particular game, with Cam Chancellor being out, with Earl Thomas having done what he did to Gronkowski, with Tom Brady wincing because of the hit Cam Chancellor put on him. This Seattle defense is returning back to the elite kind of form we saw a couple of years ago. I'm worried about Carson Wentz so much in this game. I don't think it's a big game for him at all. We should expect him to lose. We should expect him to get beat up. And we should pray that Doug Peterson gets him the hell out of there early before he gets himself hurt in this particular game. A game in which, by the way, I think the Eagles have little to no chance of winning.
Stephen A. Smith, today you are the broken clock. You are right, finally, on a subject today. It is not that this is a big game for Carson Wentz. It's that this is a big game for the perception of Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz, just here's the eyeball test you always want me to use, Stephen A. Smith. He's good. He's good. Just like Dak Prescott, you could tell early on, boy, that's a good quarterback. Carson Wentz, same thing. You look at it, well, that's a good quarterback. You can see it. He can play. And when Lane Johnson was in, when his offensive line was better, QBR was 70, and he was balling. And then he loses some protection, and all of a sudden, he's not that good anymore. So the perception will be, if Seattle really beats him up and wins, as you mentioned, at home, that he's, well, what's going on with Carson Wentz? And they'll be talking about it, and we'll be talking about it on TV, and it'll be in the papers and online, and whispers, maybe he's not as good as we thought. Boy, Dak is really the guy you want. No, it's the situation he's in. Carson Wentz, if he stays healthy, looks like he's going to be a really good quarterback for a really long time. That's what it looks like to me. And I don't think you can base anything on the Seahawks game. That said, they have chances to win this game. One of the problems with Chip Kelly in San Francisco this year is if you have a talent gap, if you're worse than the other team, you want lower possession games. You want fewer possessions in the game. Because the more possessions there are, the more action there is back and forth, the wider the score will tend to become in the other team's favor. They're better than you. When there is a talent gap, if you think the Seahawks are better than the Eagles, and I think we agree about that, you'd like a lower scoring game where each possession, each score is worth more, and you have more possibilities toward the end of the game. And given the Eagles' defense, and I think Peterson was right about this, not that they're the best defense in the league, but they're among them. That's a really good defense the Eagles have. This could potentially be a low-scoring game, giving the Eagles a better chance to win toward the end, more opportunities. So I think it's winnable. I think Carson Wentz could even be the hero in a game like this. But if he loses, as they are likely to do, big deal. What does that have to do with the quality of Carson Wentz? It has to do with the quality of the team he's on at the moment.
He doesn't even need to be playing in this game as far as I'm concerned. He can play. He's the starting quarterback, so I guess you got to put him out there. But I'm concerned about his health in this particular game. He has no weapons. As far as I'm concerned, he's nothing more than target practice for the Seattle Seahawks. And if he ends up being anything more, it's because the Seattle Seahawks, who played against Buffalo a couple of weeks ago on a Monday night, had to fly across the country to go up against the New England Patriots the very next weekend on a Sunday night, and now are back in Seattle for this game. Either they're tired or they were just disinterested in playing. But if they have any interest in playing whatsoever, Carson Wentz may not survive this damn game because he has no weapons to speak of, because none of his weapons are out there healthy. I'm very, very worried about him for this game, and I think the Eagles should be as well.